Hey guys, this is Kirob speaking, and today we are doing the discussion video that was announced in the mini review and a blockchain experiment video about Book of Demons and the new distribution model by Game Nation in collaboration with the Book of Demons developers. I think I'm in a rather unique position to talk about these issues, as I'm definitely a gamer. I'm a very small influencer as well, I guess, and I own part of a computer game making company. And also I'm a community manager, so I'm kind of a little bit in all of these shoes that this new distribution model does affect, which makes it really interesting for me, and definitely highlights also, at least to me, the potential conflicts of interest if there are no further safeguards placed in this distribution model. And we are going to explore all of these, well, not all of these, but quite a few of these today, and try to find solutions. And this is, of course, a discussion video, and I would appreciate if you would take the discussion down into the comments below. Maybe we can find some really good solutions together. From talking to the guys at Game Nation, they are definitely open to suggestions and comments. So yeah, make it happen, guys. Comment down below what your ideas are, and the best ones that come out from it I will definitely forward to the Game Nation developers. I see a few key issues that I would like to tackle in this video today. And by the way, while we are tackling all these things, of course, in the background you see footage from the game Book of Demons, which I wholeheartedly can recommend, and you will also find my referral link down in the description. If you haven't tried it out, there is a free demo, so go ahead and give it a go. Alright, but what are the key issues I'm seeing with the distribution model that is currently in its first baby steps of implementation with the experiment, the trial experiment they are running? Well, the first topic I will address is Steam itself, and why they should tolerate this kind of business model on the side of them without them getting a cut like they usually do. The second issue is kind of in two parts, or even more parts, and that is refunds. Super important for a good service, but very hard to do if money is instantly going to the developer and influencers. So there needs to be some kind of solution for that, because otherwise many people will prefer to just buy the game off Steam and have the additional safety in having the option to get a refund. Another major issue I'm seeing here is the potential conflict of interest with influencers just trying to sell as many games as possible, and that also factors into the refund policy, and maybe a solution is within there when it comes to measuring refunds versus influencers and potentially punishing the bad ones. And then the last bit, what you should do with every good game mechanic there is when you're trying to design something. You try to look at it from all angles and try to find the best exploits and how you completely can crush the system you have in place. Because if you safeguard against all those things, then you have something that works. Okay, let's get started with the first topic, and that would be Steam and their share of the cake. 30% of the cake, to be precise. And why should they allow a Game Nation next to them? The first thing that comes to mind is that there already are key resellers in the market which Steam tolerates. And the question to ask here probably is, why would they tolerate such Steam key resellers? If we look at it from Steam's perspective, they don't gain anything, and actually they lose something, for the person that comes via a key that is bought somewhere else and activates it on Steam to download the game there and then continue to play it. They have the server costs, but now come all the advantages for them. For one, the gamer is on their platform and is constantly bombarded with their sales and offers and games that would suit you, and I can imagine that that is a really effective thing. Also, if you already are on Steam and you get another key from outside to activate it, then you are even more tightly bound to the Steam platform, which is probably one of the main sources of income from them. Not only do you buy games on Steam, which won't be available through this new distribution model, but also they get to collect all the good data on you. And don't forget, if something is free, then you are the product. So now let's take as an example the most scummy platform of all, G2A. And all their stolen keys being resold and shit. If Steam tolerates those operating, we don't know if they actually tolerate it or if they have to tolerate it, because they can't do anything about it. These keys are out there, many of them stolen, and they have no way of differentiating between legit keys and illegit keys. So they can't really do anything about it. But I think Game Nation wants to place themselves on a far less shady ground and foundation than G2A. So let's compare them instead to Humble. Humble is a bit of a special basket case, as they have sold so many packages of games. And now, let's be honest, we all probably have bought a package or a few in the last few years, and now be honest, how many games of those you've bought from Humble Bundle have you actually played or even downloaded? So it could be argued that, well, yeah, there are lots of keys being activated on Steam, but how many games are actually being used actively and creating costs for Steam, while tightly binding people to the Steam platform once again through these key activations? Overall, Humble seems to be a far better deal for Steam than G2A, and that's basically a no-brainer. So with all that in mind, I think one can come to the conclusion, as I did in my shorter video about this, the non-discussion video, that the answer to them tolerating it or not is yes. So I think Game Nation is on pretty good footing here until they get massive, which might happen or might not happen. We'll see about that. But now for the trickiest of topics in all of this. And I asked the developers of Game Nation if they had a solution for that, because that was one of the first issues that came to my mind, and that is refunds. How would refunds work in a system where the money instantly goes to the involved parties? Let's say someone buys the game, or a game, and then after, let's say, a week, just having played it a little bit, and it's not really working, it's buggy and not really fun for the person, and so this person requests a refund. Well, because everything is instant, as opposed to on Steam, where it can take up to 60 days, that refund money that needs to get back to the person may already be gone or spent in some other way. So how do you deal with that? My first suggestion to potentially solve this issue was to point out that the refund rate for good games usually is on the order of less than 5%. Which means that overall, Game Nation would have to keep a buffer of 5% of the sales price for each game sold. Because then these 5% add up to the total, like 1 in 20 games being refunded, then can give back the money to the person that requested the refund, because those funds still are there. But this means that everyone would have to pay 5% extra, for instance. Steam itself provides a pretty good service nowadays with the refunds, like 2 hours of playtime, or I think it's 2 weeks of owning the game, and you can request a refund of it. And that works pretty well, but I think it works well because they have such a large margin or buffer there with their 30% they're taking on top. So that is a non-issue for them. Also, the funds haven't been paid out yet. So yeah, it's easy to take that back then. Another thing that comes to mind would be an option on buying the game from a service provider like Game Nation, where you can choose to have the option of a refund or not, making the game cheaper if you decide to not have the option of a refund. Not providing any refunds is an interesting dilemma, and that could actually bring about something that we gamers long for, and that is the return of demos. Because if you have good demos which really show off the game, then you basically don't need a refund option, or do you? That is definitely something I would argue should be discussed in the comments below, what your opinions are on that. But now let's talk a little bit about the perverse incentives this could potentially bring, this whole system, with influencers directly getting a share of the sales. So what could happen here is that influencers become overly positive about a game. That could be, for instance, that they have cozied up to the developers. I definitely remember the days when I was dreaming about becoming a games developer, or like even talking to one. So that's a little bit of a starstruck moment. So why wouldn't influencers kind of feel the same? Why would they all of a sudden be like, yeah, fuck those developer guys, we are just telling the cold hard truth? Certainly they would be a little bit kinder than they maybe should be. I'm not saying that they should be assholes. Fair criticism is very difficult to determine what it actually means and is if you are good friends with someone, right? That is super difficult to do, and thus a conflict of interest with the influencers and between the influencers and their audience. The other perverse incentive here is just money itself. Let's say the hypothetical scenario, we have an influencer which has, let's say, 50,000 subscribers and tends to cover a whole range of games, and this influencer is just fed up with it all, doesn't like YouTube anymore, and wants to do something else. So now he becomes the ultimate sellout and starts advertising mediocre games as the best thing ever since sliced bread. And now all his subs, who have learned to appreciate all the good content, really trust him and buy the game. And it's really turning out to not be what they expected or what the influencer said it would be. Also, it is a buggy mess. So what would happen then? What would happen in that situation? I think you would directly see the outrage in the community towards the influencer, but also you would see a much higher rate of refunds. And maybe that is the key here. Maybe that is the key to stop perverse incentives from even coming up. Maybe the refund rate could be tied into the slice that the influencer and the game developer gets. If a game developer develops a shitty game with loads of bugs, then they should receive less money from the platform, from these contracts, because they are causing more damage overall with refunds and stuff. The same goes for the influencers. If they are advertising bad games as the best thing ever, then they should suffer for it. Maybe there is a good way of tying the revenue the influencer gets to the rate of refunds itself. In general, the good thing here is, though, that there is no single party in here that enjoys refunds. Neither the gamer, nor the influencer, nor the developer. And of course, least of all, the distributor. So yes, that is a good thing, because everyone wants to get to a system where there is 0% refunds, even though refunds exist. And now I would like to bring up one extreme case of an exploit. Like the worst case scenario I could think of, and that is a case that Game Nation would need to guard against and make completely non-feasible in the case that they eventually offer refunds with improved smart contracts. And that is, let me describe to you, the ultimate evil. Alright, so you have your Russian key resellers, yes, right, you have a picture in mind, yes? They buy the game, they refund the game without activating it on Steam, and then sell it to G2A, where that key gets sold, and they have revenue. Of course, that is something that needs to be made non-feasible, because otherwise this will be just collapsing within a month of operation. A potential solution for that case might be that you disallow people to refund beyond a certain threshold. For instance, you could say that you are only allowed to refund a maximum of 50% of the purchase value you have made. Where the 50% obviously is just a random number I've guessed now. But I think even that would make the G2A route we just described completely non-viable. Also, Game Nation would have the interest in keeping people buying games from them via their platform. And I think a fair way of doing that would be to offer to people who have not refunded anything for a longer time, like the informed consumer, to give them cheaper games over time. Like the more they have bought and not refunded, the cheaper games get. And that would be, yeah, up to a point where their margin for refunds is used up entirely, so that that person who is never refunding anything is actually getting games cheaper by the margin that they usually otherwise have to keep in order to finance refunds. That sure would be a good incentive for people to get informed before they hit the buy button. And if we weren't already, now we're off into speculation and just random thought territory. So another thought I had was, what would actually happen to influencers in general if this system would take root? And that's an interesting question. I think what would happen is that influencers on average would become more specialized on certain genres, but also on certain developers, because if they have a much better contact to the developers, they can offer a more niche product on their platform, like YouTube for instance, where they can have more in-depth information because they are getting it first-hand. That would lead to somewhat more in-depth content, but of course it would be difficult to balance that against the potential pitfall of becoming all too cozy with the developers. Another thing that could happen is that influencers become all too harsh on developers and their games because they are fearing a backlash from the community, just saying that they are not honest enough or whatever. And yeah, I don't know how that would go. Could go either way, really. One giant improvement for gamers and the influencers and their contact between each other would be that influencers could make a living out of that, easily if they're good. Because if they have, let's say, 100,000 subscribers and regularly get like 20 to 30,000 views, and they are doing game reviews and let's plays, and are honest and good about reporting on the games they are playing and the developments therein, then I can easily believe that if they are getting like even 5 or 10% of the revenue share, then that is easily enough to build a career upon. And that in turn would benefit the gamer as well, because then you have influencers that are not only doing this in their free time in the evening 2 hours, but rather full time, and can focus all their effort into higher production quality, better information, and a higher research to minutes video ratio. So yeah, that could potentially benefit the industry quite a lot and make almost make standard quick reviews no longer necessary. And by that I mean like the classic gaming magazine, I played it for 2 hours, now I'm writing a review thing. That could potentially completely be eradicated by this, because the influencers have a vested interest in digging deeper and actually competing against other influencers on who makes the best content to get those juicy funds. Another random question I came up with is, what about the marketing budget for the developers? Would that actually be smaller or larger than before? What I think would be the case is that the influencer model is a lot more effective than just spamming random ads on Facebook or whatever, or on YouTube for that matter. And we have seen more and more developers to go towards that, and that actually includes our studio. We are only working via influencers and have never spent anything else. For instance, what we did, I thought was pretty smart, is to get down a car enthusiast channel owner to New Zealand, drove him around the place and organized really cool cars for him so that he could make the usual content he does, but with a little ad of us running beforehand and telling the people who were watching his content why they were there. It was really effective, and everyone won with that. Like the influencer got really cool content and wasn't even paying much for that privilege, because we paid all the bills for that. We got loads and loads of views, which we otherwise would have no chance of getting, and yeah, we got plenty of sales through that. And the viewer, obviously, of the influencers' content got plenty of cool shit that they would never have seen otherwise. But back to the question, would the marketing budget be lower or higher, or stay the same? And I think it would kinda stay the same as it is. Unless we're talking AAA publishers and games, the marketing budget is on the order of 10 to 15% if you, compared to all the other costs. I would say that's a fair amount to spend on marketing in general. Some would consider that low, others would consider that high. Some indies definitely don't do anything like this and just hope for the best. But there's definitely a good place to spend that 10% money to get some visibility. And I think that will be remaining more or less the same. Overall, more effective, like I mentioned. And the good thing about it is that it is not paid up front before you have any results. That is very important, and that just came to mind now. That's actually a huge benefit, because usually it is the way that you have to invest heavily and pay for a marketing campaign that then launches and you have no clue if it works or not. In this case, you have no clue if it works or not, but if it doesn't work, you're not paying a single thing. And another little interesting side note. Maybe this is something that in general would lead to a lot more transparency. Like I did show you just briefly in the video I made previously about this experiment we are running there. You can even see the code for the contracts and all the involved parties in there. That is a whole lot of transparency, and maybe that gives people overall more security and trust in the whole system, and could make games data tracking a lot more feasible. Like GameSpy, yo, GameSpy now having access to all the sales and what each influencer got from a game and everything. That would be kind of interesting to see how this whole system works out in that way too. But alright, I have rambled on here for long enough, and this video needs to come to an end too. Let me quickly reiterate the points I would like you to talk about down in the comments with potential solutions and just your comments and ideas in general. And that would be the refund issue and potential solutions, the perverse incentives of the influencers versus the developers and their gaming audience, and of course, the various exploits. Can you think of more exploits? Like the one I described, I thought was pretty extreme, but maybe there are more I haven't considered yet. And then, of course, all the good stuff, all your thoughts about where this could be headed just in general. Alright, hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.